Welcome, everybody, to another Thoughts and Feelings podcast. And I'm here with Grace. Grace is a person that I have never met before, and we're here today to discuss the topic of psychotherapy. I hold the opinion that it's impossible to heal deep trauma without talk therapy or psychodynamic therapy specifically. And Grace holds a different opinion. She does not feel that way. So I look forward to getting into it. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you.
So, would you like to start on this vast topic, or would you like me to open with something?
I'll start. I'll just let the listeners or watchers have a little bit of insight. I have done talk therapy for six years, and I have diagnosed PTSD, a lot of trauma, and depression and anxiety. So I do have a little bit of understanding on the topic, and so I just wanted to kind of put my credentials for mental health right there. And then you can go and hit me with your questions.
Okay. So when I hear that somebody has, dealt with trauma in their life and has sought therapy, I often wonder whether they've gotten the right type of therapy, because I'm of the opinion that 50%, maybe more, of therapists are not able to help their patients enough to get them to a place where they can lead a really healthy life, even if it took a long time, that the therapists themselves aren't prepared to do so. So I wonder how you feel about the therapy you've had. How helpful was it? And I'm sure it was varied depending on the therapist. But
yeah, I've had about 12 therapists in total. Which is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I've probably had two good ones that actually helped me. And a lot of them, as you were saying, they were not prepared to help me. And they, in fact, made my issues a lot worse. My last therapist I had, it went really bad. And he actually ended up stalking me outside of therapy, and he showed up places I was and sent me some very interesting text messages. So
that's horrible.
He's no longer my therapist. Yeah, it wasn't great. So I've had a couple good experiences in therapy, but I've also had experiences when they're not equipped for it, and the therapy instead takes me down a much worse trajectory than I was going on.
I have so many questions. Okay. Well, first, by what standard do you judge whether a therapist is good?
Well, first, I try to look at their credentials. So when I call my insurance to see what's going on, they have like a little synopsis, and I look at the things that they target with their clients, like what their specialty is. And so I look at their list and see if I have any of those issues, or if they're equipped to help my issues. And then I normally go in and I have a first session with them. And if we don't click in the first session, then I say, you know what, this isn't working out. I don't really think we're going to be a good fit. And then I go towards a different one. It's not based on what their education is. Like if they didn't go to Harvard or something, that's not what I care about. I just need them to really understand my issues, or help me understand where the root of my issues are.
Do you look for someone that gives you a feeling that they're an authority, that you could, you feel like you're learning something that you didn't already know? Because one thing I'm getting from you right off the bat is that you're smart and quick and independent, like you take care of yourself well. I only know you for a few minutes, but that's the sense I'm getting off the bat. So I wonder what it could either be threatening or potentially like relaxing, and exactly what you're looking for, to feel that someone could be an authority relative to you. And I wonder if you look for that.
That's actually a really good question. I haven't really had any therapists that felt like an authority to me. A lot of them, I feel like, go more alongside me and like listen and then respond, which isn't helpful to me because I'm a super logical person. So what I'm looking for in a therapist, which I haven't really found, is kind of just someone that really knows their stuff, and then they can say logically, here's where we're at. So this is what you need to do. But instead, a lot of therapists, I feel like, pander to me, and they're like, oh, that must have been a very traumatic experience. That makes sense why you have this, but there's never, oh, it makes sense that you have this trauma. So here are the steps. I've done CBT therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which if you don't know, you know, obviously, but other listeners might not. And that has been more helpful because it brings a solution instead of just telling someone your problems and then shaking their head and saying, you know, yeah, that sounds difficult.
And I think in what you just said, I'm finding a place where we feel really differently because, forgive me if this is blunt, but I do want this dialogue to be as direct as possible. I don't feel like you can get long-term help from CBT, from cognitive behavior. I feel only psychodynamic, and that's the point of this conversation, is that I hold that opinion. Only psychodynamic can heal deep trauma, because I feel like deep trauma is nearly impossible to heal. Almost nobody heals deep trauma. And when I say heal, I don't mean 100%. I just mean really get through it where it's not a part of their day-to-day life, that they're dealing with their trauma. This has been my experience in my life, and I'm only one person, so I could be wrong, but I do hold this conviction. So I'm interested in, I don't know, how do you react to that?
Well, you know, CBT and therapy, regular therapy, it has not healed my trauma. I still got issues. I still have PTSD battling on a daily basis. So, you know, maybe I haven't been going long enough. I mean, 6 years is a decent amount of time, but, you know, maybe it hasn't been long enough. But that hasn't helped me. And I've done CBT, which I totally agree that CBT isn't a solution. To me, CBT is tools that you can use in the moment. It doesn't make it go away.
Right.
It just makes it more manageable, you know. That's what I found. I don't know.
No, that's my understanding too. Yeah. Why I say that's a good thing to have if you've done talk therapy that goes deeper into the psyche, and, you know, you are just dealing with an addiction or a really bad, you know, relationship that you're getting over or something, then I can understand it being a short span of time type of solution. So it's like I'm not trying to lower its value.
Oh, yeah, no.
But
yes, it's not long term, no. I agree with that 100%. I do think it's helpful in the moment, but that's I mean, that's what I use it for. I don't know if those therapists believe that it's going to be long term, but I was taught that it's something that you put in your tool belt of help. So when you're in a grocery store and you have like a PTSD flashback or something, then you can use what you've learned in that, and then that applied.
That completely makes sense to me. But hearing about that, I almost feel like it hurts me to know that most people may be like, well, that's what I need. I need a way to deal with those flashbacks, which is like saying I need a way to deal with the symptoms and not the disease. And and I think that's a reasonable metaphor that, you know, psychodynamic therapy with a talented therapist, which I think, I don't know if it's 20% or 10% are, but, you know, I've tried out a lot of therapists and had this sense, because I'm a bit of a tough patient in that I'm perfectly willing to feel that I know more than they do about certain things just from my life experience. Obviously, I don't have their training, but I can sense if they're trying to get something out of the therapy and it's not as much a selfless thing where they're really there to benefit the patient. There's a lot of therapists that, you know, so the first thing that I asked, just kind of going back to how you choose a therapist, what you were talking about before, is I say, tell me about your own therapy. And if they say they haven't been to their own therapy, then the conversation's over. And the reason for that is because I believe almost every person is traumatized in some way, some smaller than others. But, we've had as humans, we've had some brutal pasts. And if you think about where, like my grandparents were, or maybe your great grandparents, and World War II, World War One, and how scarce things were. I mean, there's just so much trauma out there. So I always look to see, how long did you go to therapy? Did you do psychodynamic therapy? Or did you just learn things from a book and then go through some clinical, training or whatever you're required to do and then go out and practice? Because if that's the case, I think that you need your own therapy for, I don't know, at least like 4 or 5 years to qualify with me as a therapist that could really help me.
I think that's I'm going to start asking future therapists that now. I haven't done that, but I think I'm going to ask them, have you been to therapy? Probably the most helpful therapist I've had. She didn't quote unquote fix me, but she did help me. She had a lot of the same issues I had, and she shared that with me. And she said, oh, I had these issues, and this is what helped me. And I'm like, okay, you've been around the block. You get this, you know what I'm feeling. You're not just saying, well, the textbook says that this is a symptom of that. So that was helpful, but she didn't fix. But I personally don't think therapy can fix you.
Tell me more about that.
It's just my own opinion, and I'm sorry for listeners if that's depressing. I wish it could fix me, wish it could fix everyone.
Yeah.
But, I think that we have to take our issues, and I don't actually know if for certain issues, like, for example, I have depression that's just a chemical imbalance. That's not going to go away. It's not like seasonal depression. And, I don't think I can ever be fixed from that. And I don't think any amount of medication or therapy is going to fully help me recover. And it's the same thing with, my eating disorder aspect of that. There's no amount of treatment that's ever going to make me 100% perfect, except instead, what I think is I can take as much as I can from therapy, and I can try to use the skills I've learned, but I'm never going to just live a normal life and be what is normal, but live a life free of mental health issues and health issues, because I just don't think that's possible. Kind of depressing, but.
Well, it is a depressing thought, and there's an aspect that I agree with, but I also don't feel exactly the same. And I'm trying to think which direction to go. Well, okay, let me just pick a direction. One direction I'm very interested in. You talk about your PTSD, which means that you've had events in your childhood. It must be your childhood because you're only 19, so everything is childhood. But you've had events in your childhood that traumatized you. And I don't know how deep they go, but I guess I'm curious why you would feel that you have a chemical imbalance when there is potentially a logical explanation for you feeling depressed in traumatic events of the past.
Well, that's an interesting thought, but I've had psychiatrists and therapists say that yes, you have depression because of these events that have happened to you, but also your genetic makeup. Because I've had testing done, like not DNA, but like blood test and weird testing. I've had those tests done to then say, okay, you do have your chemical makeup isn't one that has a normal balance. And I also have I'm adopted, and my biological side of the family, they all have the same kind of mental health issues that I do.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, not that you asked, but do you mind if I just share just as what I'm thinking about as I hear you say that? So I I've thought a lot about this, and I've definitely come to believe that trauma is passed down. Things that occur in your life that you weren't born with in the strands of your DNA are passed down. That's been, I believe, scientifically proven at this point, but it feels right to me. I believe I've witnessed that as well. But I also really believe in the ability to make a difference by figuring out what is true to you. And by true, there may be some really harsh things that you believe about yourself. And I say that because I feel harsh things about myself, and I feel like I relate. Now, I don't know anything about your biological parents and their parents, and what they went through is probably something really awful. But it does, however it got there, it leaves you with some beliefs about yourself. And I find that most people aren't aware that those beliefs exist. I exist as a CEO during the day, and I'm high functioning and in a good mood and get a lot done. And that's the impression most people see of me. And even in my private life, I'd say my wife most of the time sees a person that seeks out meaning in life and is happy, and there's a lot of good things, but there's some really deep private feelings I have that I did not even know about it until I unearthed them in therapy maybe 6 years ago or something like that. That are just beliefs that I had as a little boy about myself, and I like to remember that those are there, because often you can trace back the reason for me feeling a certain way to that, and I wouldn't even call it a belief. Actually, I'd call it knowledge. I am certain of this negative stuff about myself that is totally untrue. I can say logically, but the logic of the little boy is very powerful, and there's been systems built on top of that run parts of my life. So I wonder if you have awareness of anything like that, or if that rings true to you.
Well, thank you for now me being up for the next week thinking about this every night, trying to figure out my issues. So that's what that's going to be, because I agree with it. I definitely agree that trauma can be passed down, especially through the people that raise you, because if they have trauma, then they're going to instill certain beliefs and thoughts into you. 100% believe that.
Right.
Partially why I don't want kids. But that's really interesting. Now I'm going to have to think more about that, because there's probably beliefs in myself that I believe that aren't true. And actually there has been things that I have unearthed in therapy also, that they're like, you think this about yourself. I'm like, wait a minute. You're right. I do think I'm unlovable. And I guess that technically isn't true based off of the logical facts of the people that I know love me. So I agree with that statement.
I have to imagine that it's tough for you, being both logical and highly competent as I perceive you to be. It's extra tough for people like you, and I would put myself very much in those camps as well. I love logic and rational thinking. It's extra tough for people that have those advantages, because it goes against some of our logic. It doesn't feel like it's true a lot of the time. Because if you can say, I have evidence that people love me, I can name 5 people that love me or whatever, then it may seem like, why even bother with the ridiculous thought that I'm not loved? It's logically false. But then the power of the idea that it is at the same time completely true on a deep feeling level within your psyche, something that matters a lot more than your logical mind when it comes to how you feel deep down. It changes the game to think about that. And most people would rather not think about that.
Yeah, I wish I wasn't so logical a lot of the time, because then I would understand my feelings. And I've been told by numerous people that I'm not very good with feelings, because I compartmentalize everything. I'm like, trauma goes in this box, something else goes in this box. And it doesn't make sense why I feel this way. Therefore, those feelings are not valid, because logically they shouldn't be true. which is completely false. Feelings don't actually need logic, which is why I don't like feelings, because cause I can't logically justify them. And I'm someone who's was raised on learning actual logic principles.
Hmm.
My parents taught me, like as a child, that's what I did. Sometimes in free time, I had like a logic book, things like that. And my schooling had a lot of like rhetoric and logic. And so being already a logical kid, that totally instilled even more in me logic, logic, logic.
Mm-hmm.
But turns out you can't win everything with logic, which is irritating.
Totally irritating. I hate that.
I'm like, I have all the facts, all the proof, all the evidence.
Yeah.
Therefore,
Right.
this means this, but it doesn't.
Yeah. I get the sense that I'm like catching you in this place in your life where it is very possible that your trajectory from here on out is one of professional success and high competence. And sometimes that can be very masking of what's going on the feelings level, particularly when you compartmentalize your feelings, which I'm not sure if that's a little bit of a euphemism for you don't think about them that much. I don't know, but
I do think about them. I just don't want to give them power over my time because I don't think it's efficient, which, as I've learned in talk therapy, you need to actually embrace your feelings in order. But what you were saying about the success part is, well, I agree with that. And that's something that I'm going to that's why I'm still in therapy. It's because I know if I don't address my feelings and my thoughts, I'm going to be highly successful and highly miserable. And I probably, one of the most quote unquote successful times of my life, I was 16 years old. I was working 3 jobs, making a ton of money, had a 4.0, and I was going to community college at night and over the summer. So I was going to college and high school at the same time. I completely fell apart, 100%. And I did all that because I had depression, addiction, and an eating disorder. And I just tried to keep piling on success. And from the outside, I looked like the most diligent, successful 16-year-old you've ever seen in your life. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up being in treatment for about 6 months, and I just self-imploded and couldn't do it anymore. And then, so now I know the importance of taking a step back and not just diving into it and ignoring all of my thoughts and feelings, because I don't want to spend more time of my life than I need to in treatment because I ignored the symptoms of imploding.
Wow. What an incredibly powerful experience you have to draw on in that time of your life when you were 16. What you were doing is extraordinary. I've never heard of someone who's 16 that's taking community college in addition to their 4.0. The 4.0 is enough work for more than most people can do.
Well, it was actually a 4.25, but, not to...
Oh, God.
it was crazy. But, I'm really lucky that happened when I was 16 mm-hmm. and living at home.
Right.
And I had support from my mom. But so that's something that I constantly have to think about when I'm only 19, but I'm a junior in college right now. And I'm probably going to have my CPA by 21, 22 years old, maybe 23 if I go slow. And so when I start stacking on things, I have to take a step back now and I think, okay, why are you stacking on things? Is this success going to actually cause you to fail emotionally? If that's the case. So I actually removed something the other day from my crazy schedule. I was going to go to Germany for a year and go to school in Germany. And then I thought, why am I doing this? And then I realized, because I already lived in France, so I already speak French. And I thought, why am I doing this? And then I realized I'm doing it because I need to feel highly successful, to feel like I'm worth things. And that's not true. I don't have to be mega successful to be worth something or worthy of people's love. So that, did come out in talk therapy. So I will give you that on the therapy side.
Wow. All the things you're saying are making me worry about you, to be honest, because you're very clear about what's going on. Mm-hmm. I just think success is the last thing you need to worry about, or one of the last things you need to worry about, because it's going to be hard not to be successful with your work ethic and drive. But what's behind that drive is, and I only say this because I relate enough to believe, potentially wrongly, but to believe that I understand why you do that, because I did that. I was very successful at a young age, and I've seen the other side of it, and how I was like, wow, I have one type of success, but then I don't have the other that matters more to me, which has to do with basic contentment and happiness in life. And I can totally imagine, I don't know if you can imagine, why someone like Robin Williams would take their own life, or many very successful.
Anthony Bourdain.
Right.
Rest in peace, love him. Yeah, I totally see that. And that is something that also worries me. And so that is something that I try to deal with. And I try to, because when I did do that, at 16, self-imploding thing, I was miserable in what mattered. I had no social life. I didn't have that part being successful. So then my senior year of high school, I cut back on my hours, only worked one job. And, I felt like I was failing, but I actually was happier than I had been before, because I was fulfilling the important parts of my life, which was family, making more friends, doing things, and actually doing things that were good for me mentally and not just good for me success wise, because I've had major success, and it doesn't actually feel as good as I thought it was going to feel.
Right. Not to knock it. It's one of those things, like, you don't want to knock it. It's going to be very nice to have prestige, be respected, have a lot of money. All that will be nice for you. You just have to realize that it just has a place, and it may provide a certain portion, I don't know, 40% or something like that of what you need. And then it's like the rest of the stuff is going to matter a lot. Your relationships with others, particularly your relationship with yourself, but relationships as a category. And as you just mentioned, it's easy to leave relationships behind. And again, particularly with yourself, when you are high achieving. Yeah. So it'll be very interesting to see how you navigate that. And I have a question about your parents. They raised you to be very logical. How do they deal with feelings? Like, what did they model for you?
Well, my dad and I don't talk anymore, so that didn't go very well. He's not he doesn't deal with his feelings very well. He kind of just pushed them away, as well as pushing everyone else away at the same time. And my parents got divorced probably they got divorced when I was 16. So while their divorce was going on, it was very messy. I got very successful and then self-imploded. And then my mom, she is much more emotional than I am. And she deals with her feelings a lot better than I do. And I function off of logic, and she functions off more feelings at times, which to me, I'm like, no, let's not do this. But that's how she functions. And then I ended up just functioning like this.
Interesting. The divorce happened when you were 16, you said?
Yeah, they separated when I was 15, and I was 16 or 17 when they divorced. So it was about 9 months, and then they got their divorce finalized and stuff.
It's interesting overlap of timing with
Yeah. With what?
with your time where you overloaded yourself with a 4.25.
Oh, I 100% overloaded myself because of what was going on at home. I just didn't want to. I thought, I don't want to deal with my feelings about what's going on. So instead of having to be home or even deal with people's emotions at home or at all, let's just start working and not stop so you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Which did not go very well.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Amazing how many people do that. And, this is part of the problem that I think is the basis of our conversation today, is that people don't have help when they are doing things like this. They may have friends or a therapist that tells them things like what we talked about, like, this is not helping you and you need to work on your relationship with yourself. But that is barely helpful. It's identifying the true problem, which is helpful, but almost nobody knows what to do about that. And that's why I believe so strongly in psychodynamic therapy. And for most people, I don't think know what psychodynamic therapy is, but it's essentially where you talk about your childhood, not the entire time, but it springs from a place of believing that what happened in your childhood is a major part, let's say 50% plus, of what makes you, have trauma and act ways that are unhealthy today. And you go into those things very deeply to try to understand what happened. Most people don't remember what happened because we block out trauma, and then talk about the ways that trauma still lives within you, and in many ways forms the borders that you live within, your kind of psychic borders, where you never will act a certain way, or you can't be messy, or you can't let certain people in your life, because of this like little dictator, for lack of a better word, of your younger self who's trying to protect you, very innocently actually. But most people don't know this and really don't want to deal with it. It's a upsetting notion, and this is my depressing thought, like you were saying. You had yours before. Mine is one that I just think nobody wants to hear, but I will say it. I will say it anyway, because that's kind of the purpose of having this website, is to be able to say things like this, which is, I think that without several years of psychodynamic therapy, people with trauma will not have the help they need to heal, because the psychodynamic therapist basically is a witness that helps bring out your trauma and helps you discover it so that you can be aware of it and begin to develop the ability to recognize it, and then even tell yourself, hey, you don't need to do that, little self. You can calm down with your defense mechanism that makes you work constantly, or whatever it is. So most people don't want to hear that, and will never do that in their life, and will not be as good parents as they could be, and harm themselves and not get as far and grow as much as they could, because they can't get to psychodynamic therapy. And to make matters worse, psychodynamic therapy with a good therapist is not affordable for almost anybody.
Yeah, that's an issue. I don't like. I wish that I didn't agree with your thoughts on psychodynamic therapy. I really want to disagree with it. But I also know I don't think I've had the correct kind of psychodynamic therapy, but I don't want to agree with it because it makes sense. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Because part of my adoption, the first couple months of my life were very, very traumatic, like moved from one drug person to another, to living in like a place where they sold meth and had a meth lab and all that fun stuff. Very fun. And that was just the first like 3-4 months of my life was no stability and just not healthy. And that was before I got adopted and all that. And so then I'm like, oh, that might be why I'm this way. And then I had traumatic stuff in my childhood with my adopted family too, all that fun stuff. And like, I don't want to, I totally see now that you say how it affects every part. Like, yeah, I don't want to agree with you.
I appreciate your resistance. And if you did disagree, I would be very interested to hear it, because
it's just, I know I want to, because I compartmentalize and I'm logical. I want to think that happened in the past. Let's move on. Mm-hmm. But you can't just do that. You can't just move on when certain thoughts, feelings, and defense mechanisms have become ingrained in you.
Right.
And, makes me irritated. Why'd you have to bring this up? Oh, no, now I'm going to be thinking about this all the time. I think too much.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I'm there too. Part of my purpose of being in the world is to try to add positivity in some way, some small way. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely not a person that would consciously do harm. I believe that if you find what I'm saying to resonate and be true after this conversation, then it will be the beginning of taking some, making some decision that's helpful to you using that knowledge. It's not meant to just.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate hearing your opinion, because now I'm going to have to reevaluate my whole therapy schedule and look into something new. Because I was actually looking into EDMR therapy, which is deep. You know what it is, but I don't know what listeners know. It's rapid eye movement, basically, and then you unlock trauma and then you move through it. I don't know if it would be helpful for me. Probably, who knows? But now you're just giving me new stuff to think about in a new form of therapy, because now I'm thinking maybe I haven't tried the right therapist.
Yeah.
It's hard to find. Pardon?
It's hard to find the right therapist. It's hard to even know what you're looking at. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I see, I do, and I have seen before how parts of my life that I'm not aware of, or certain things that have happened to me a long time ago, how they affect me now. Totally see that. And I see how, like, for example, my parents didn't always have super stable, we moved a lot, or super stable jobs, or moving as educators. So part of that instilled in me, you need to be successful as well as stable. So that's why I went into accounting, because it's a stable job, which then, you can open your own firm and be successful with all that fun stuff. And so that's just one small path of how my childhood has played out and how I function now.
It's great that you're aware of that. The reason behind it.
I knew that's why I chose accounting. I mean, I wanted to do culinary, and then I didn't. And for a lot more reasons than just that, but.
Interesting. I just find myself feeling curious, like what you'll ultimately decide to do. And I guess I'm also curious what, I have a few things I'm curious about. This happens to me all the time. All right, let's start with the small thing, and then there's a bigger thing. The smaller thing is, when you do seek, let's say you decide to try to see a psychodynamic therapist, possibly in combination with another. I mean, the other ones may be helpful, but I don't think they're going to get at the root. The root cause is what you need to get to. And so I'm curious, if do you have the means? Would you need to stay within an insurance plan where you're paying like a $20 copay, or like you're 19, you're very successful?
Right now, no, I don't have the means. But so that means I might have to wait until I have, my CPA. I have better income, because right now, I'm not a CPA. I work at a bookkeeping firm.
Right.
which it's not crazy pay or anything. It's not crazy money,
Hmm.
and I'm using that money to pay for other things like life as well as college expenses and all that fun stuff. So I think that if it's not an insurance, I'm not going to be able to drain my savings account right now, but that doesn't mean I can't currently do the research on who I want to see. And then when I have the means and I'm working at a decent paid job, then I can't decide to go then do that.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
right now I have to stay in network just because I don't have the means to see a $200 an hour therapist twice a week.
Right.
Wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. And it's
Or
okay.
it could, and then I just wouldn't go to college. Which I kind of need to do that.
Yeah. Well, therein lies the conundrum that I mentioned earlier, which just it truly breaks my heart that this is the case. Not for you, because you will be able to afford it not too long from now, I feel pretty certain. But for most people, it's just not approachable. And I have to think there's some good younger therapists that are in network, but the good therapists that I've seen, and there haven't been many, they are not in network. They don't need to be.
Because they can afford to just see certain clientele, and like they don't. It makes me sad. It makes me really sad.
Yeah, me too. Me too. These are good-hearted people that just, it's like, why would you want to deal with the bullshit of an insurance company?
Yeah, they're a mess. Like, I hate insurance. I hate calling insurance, being like, "Hi, who can I see? Please see a list. Oh, who do I pay? What do I do?"
Right. From the psychologist side, it's also a mess, from what I understand. And you don't always get paid what you're supposed to, and it's yeah. So it's like, but I often wonder, and I have asked my current therapist this, like, so are you okay with the fact that you are making wealthy people's lives better? That's one way of defining what you're doing by the day. And I think his answer was that is just one dimension by which we define people. So I'm happy making people's lives better, and therapy is not the only thing that I do in my life that contributes to my life purpose. He also does research and publishes his findings and stuff that will have broader impact on the psychological community. So that was his personal answer, but I feel like it puts the good therapist into this tough place of, but I think, I was just going to say, I think some of them do some pro bono, or they scale their, but anyway, what were you saying?
Well, I think therapists need to be. I mean, if they're talented, I want them to be compensated accordingly because, they should be if they're helping people. But it's hard because so many people have issues, and I don't think it's wrong that they're only benefiting wealthy people. But I think that there's a whole group of people that, people that come from inner city, for example, and they grow up with trauma of gangs and gun violence and drug violence and home. They're never going to be able to afford that kind of therapist unless they, I mean, I'm not saying they're never going to be able to, but it's just not something that they see other people in their community doing for the majority of the time. So how are they going to get that help themselves?
Right.
If they don't even know that even exists.
Yeah.
Which is sad. But then at the same time, you don't want a therapist who is done so much research and so much work, not to be getting compensated. So it's just, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. My other question. I'm curious, with all of your background that you talked about, what your situation with romantic relationships is.
I am in one, and that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
It's very good. I've actually been in a relationship for almost 3 years, which is shocking to me because I've had a lot of, I've been to 12 different schools growing up, and I moved to 3 different states, 2 different countries, moved all the time. And So for me, what I have to really, really work on in my romantic relationship is being okay being vulnerable with someone, which has taken a lot of practice. And it probably took me a year of dating him to actually be able to open up. And I found someone very special who really, really cares about me and actually cares about understanding my issues and wasn't pushy with me trying to open up with them, but instead just said, I'm here for you. If you want to talk, whenever you do, let me know. But it's something I have to continually work on, and that is to be okay letting my guard down with someone, which is very, very difficult for me to do, as well as being okay realizing that sometimes people care about you and they're not going to abandon you. And that's just the way it is. And you're going to have to deal with that. And it's scary. But I found someone really special.
That's so wonderful. I'm really, really happy to hear that. He sounds like a really good person.
Yeah, he's a sweet, sweet dude. We met in high school, and I asked him out and worked out.
So you have trouble being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I do too. That's one of my main issues that I still am working on. Because like there's so much that happens inside, but I guess I don't feel it's safe to express it externally to most people. Like they'll hurt me or abandon me.
Well, especially if you're a successful CEO, you can't be vulnerable. Then people aren't going to take you seriously. And that's what you might think.
Right. No, that is what I think. And I actually completely logically believe there is not much place for vulnerability in the business world. Certainly the one that I'm in.
I don't think so either. I'm the youngest person at the place I work by far. Mm-hmm. And they took a huge gamble even hiring me. And I love my boss. But, I was dealing with some really, really hard depression a couple months ago where I had to call in sick once a week because it was just so bad. But I just kept, you cannot show that in business. Just go and do your job, stone face, get what needs to be done, because as much as I want people to have feelings and be healthy in business, I think that there's a certain line that you shouldn't cross with professionalism. People don't need to know your issues. Get your job done, take time off if you need it, and do stuff. That's just me. Maybe it's the field I'm in.
Yeah, the field you're in is about the least emotional field possible.
Yeah.
By definition, yeah. But I think there's perhaps a little bit more give than go in, get your job done, and as if you're not a human. I think there's the acknowledgement that people are human. I'm having a tough day. I'm going to take some time. I feel like that's okay in the workplace to say, and it's. Yeah. But right, but people are there mostly because they're trying to get things done, make money, have their career, accomplish stuff. And it just kind of feels, it feels out of place to have too much in the way of emotion. And you'd be lucky to meet somebody through work that you can be more vulnerable with. That would be a friend. It wouldn't be someone probably above you or running the business, but that would be a wonderful thing. Can I ask
I agree with that.
Your relationship with crying? Do you cry much?
That's a good question.
I figured
there was a time. That's a great question, actually. One time I didn't cry for so long, my tear ducts got clogged, and I didn't know that was possible, but it is. And I had to pull out the little thing that clogged it. I don't know what it was. It was weird, but yeah. I used to not cry at all because I was super depressed, super shut down, total robot, did not have time for emotions or feelings because I thought that if I let myself cry, I just was not going to get put back together. Mm-hmm. And now what I do instead I'm still not an emotional person, like crying wise, but if I feel like I need to cry, I will set an alarm on my phone for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. And I say, take this time to have a meltdown. Okay. The timer ends, wash your face, get back to work. So I think crying is important. I need to cry more. I probably cry once every 2 months if I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I cried today, actually, so that was good.
Oh, I'm
Cried
happy
this
to hear
morning.
that.
Yeah, go me, woo woo. But it's been interesting for me though, because society sees women as people that cry a lot.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily wrong. Like my mom and my sister, it's like, oh, there's a cute puppy, I'm gonna start crying. Like, to me, I've never been that way. I've always been more reserved. Even as a kid, I didn't cry a ton as a kid either. And now that you mention it, your whole psychodynamic stuff makes me realize that when I was very young, before I was adopted, my crying didn't necessarily get a response from others. So they would just, they're doing drugs or whatever. I would cry apparently, and that doesn't mean I got picked up. So maybe that's why now I don't cry, because I don't see there being a response or a benefit from it, which I know is false. But psychodynamically or whatever, it would make sense, because as a kid, if I didn't get picked up every time I cried, or I didn't always have someone pay attention when I cried as a young child, then now it's just not really ingrained in me.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Do you cry? What's your relationship with crying?
I think it's gotten a lot better. There was a period of about 15 years, from about 15 to 30. I'm in my late 30s right now, where I didn't cry even once. I wasn't able. And then after that, and shortly after, I met my wife, who's really helped me to understand that I'm a person that isn't just performing. Yeah. I began crying, and at first it was really deep, because I had so much pain that was unexpressed. And then I settled into just when something comes up, and I'd say nowadays it's every 2 weeks or so something will move me. I think last night I cried. Oh, I was watching a movie when I cried last night.
I think we need to normalize in society men crying.
Yeah.
100%. Because when they don't, they just let it eat them. Well, I'm not a man, but for me, when I didn't cry, just let it eat me up inside. And I can't imagine being someone and being told, if you cry, you're weak. You're not weak. You're just dealing with stuff.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend cries a lot more than I do. He's very emotional. I love him. But he's like, do you care that I cry? I'm like, no. One of us needs to cry. And turns out it's you right now. And you know what? You cry. I'm going to make you some cookies. And after that, it's going to be great. And he's like, okay, sounds good to me.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of this guy. He sounds wonderful.
He's great.
Yeah, that is true. And that's almost such a big subject that maybe for another dialogue, but yeah, it's not encouraged. I have to think it's getting better in our society, that men are encouraged to have emotion in the first place. I think more so than when I was growing up. But it's still very difficult, because there's the leftover feelings from people's childhoods, or cultural material that basically said that men have to be strong, and made fun of if you cry. In my childhood, that was what it was. It was totally shameful. And
men.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, men suffer more mental health than women actually a lot of the time, but they just don't get treated because it's shameful.
Right.
And one thing I saw when I was going through my eating disorder was so many guys have eating disorders that they just don't talk about because it's embarrassing and that's a girl issue or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met a couple guys in treatment who had eating disorders. And I also met a lot of guys that I actually did a podcast and a speech for my school about my eating disorder.
Oh.
And I had a couple guys contact me about their eating disorders and they needed someone to talk to. And they were like, hey, I think I have an eating disorder, but I don't want to, everyone's going to make fun of me. And so then, kind of helped them a little bit or tried to help them. But I just think we need to normalize that emotions and psychological issues don't really have like a certain gender. Everyone has them. Mm-hmm. We need to be okay with that.
Definitely.
I need to be okay with that for me having issues.
Well, I love that you have that viewpoint, and I love when I hear that viewpoint from young people, from anyone really. But yeah, if you guys, if you decide to have kids one day and you have a boy, I think passing that on would be a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah. That's what I'd want to do. I really want to be a foster mom, actually, because I think that there's not enough people I want to be a teen foster mom because I don't think that they're set up for success in the foster care system a lot of the time. Oh. So I want to be a place where I can help them open a bank account in their own name. And so when they turn 18 and they get kicked out of foster care, they actually have skills and the ability to live a successful life instead of, a lot of the time it doesn't go very well. That's what I want to do.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
And if you do that and you're a teen foster mom, are you still their mom when they're like 25?
If they don't want to call me mom, they don't have to call me mom. Uh-huh. But if they want, because I don't think I could legally adopt a ton of kids, but if right. They always want to come home to my house for Christmas, mm-hmm. When they're 25, if they need someone to call, if they want to call me Grace, they want to call me mom, whatever, I'm there for them. I want to help them. So that's what I want to do.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, hopefully it goes well. That's gotta get some of my own issues done first.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah.
But having that intention, I think, is really beautiful. And I think about that sometimes too. I have one child. I have a son with my wife, and it is just about the most meaningful thing. Not just about, definitely the most meaningful thing I've ever done, and very purposeful in wanting him to have, really strong, positive mental health.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
Yes, I feel great about it. But honestly, I think about sometimes wanting to adopt a child, even though
totally.
Yeah.
I was adopted, totally changed my life.
Yeah.
And my mom, she's my mom, but mm-hmm. The lady whose house this is right now, she's my mom. The mm-hmm. lady that gave me up for adoption, her and I actually have a relationship, but she's not my mom. Mm-hmm. My mom that adopted me, she's my mom. My biological mother, she's just my biological mother, and mm-hmm. she's a great person now, and she's really turned her life around. I really care about her, but she's never going to be my mom. My mom is the lady that raised me, and she's a really awesome lady, and I love her to death. Mm-hmm. So
that's great to hear. That's wonderful. And it speaks to how powerful a decision it can be to decide to, to adopt a child who, mm-hmm. You never know what direction that life can go in when in the first place, what brought them there was something difficult, a break, a separation that, theoretically would be much better if that didn't happen. And
Hmm.
to be able to put someone on a healthy path again, almost like replant the seed of their life and let it grow
Yeah,
is beautiful. So yeah, we'll see if I end up doing that if my
that'd be
wife wants
cool.
to. But I love the idea because there are so many kids that just like you were, that
Just
need it.
and well, there's everyone thinks that they have to adopt a kid from like Russia or Uganda. I was adopted from Houston, Texas. Like there are kids everywhere that need
Yeah.
homes.
Hmm.
You don't have to go very far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone thinks that. I grew up in the church, and it was really popular. And one of the things it was not, I didn't think was okay, but there's like a little phase of time where it was popular to like go to Uganda and adopt a baby, and that was like the righteous thing to do. And that those kids totally needs homes too. Totally agree with that. But people almost looked at adopting kids from their own neighborhood as like it's not as good, it's not as holy, and I disagree with that immensely. I
I'm
think
glad.
every kid needs a home. That
Yeah.
like I don't think that one kid should have, like, I'm not blaming the kid that got adopted from Uganda. I think they definitely needed a home and someone to care about them. But I think that people should just, I don't know, do what they want to do. But I think that every kid needs a home that doesn't have one.
I like that. I'm glad that you shared that.
Yes.
I'll think about that too, because yeah, for some reason, my first thought when I've talked about this with my wife is another country, perhaps for our benefit because of the interestingness of that somehow. But
Hmm.
I like what you're saying a lot, and I think it probably just like whatever direction you feel called, makes
Yeah.
sense.
I
But
mean, if you feel really called to go to, I don't know, Russia, Uganda, someplace, that's great.
mhm,
But I saw, I felt like people would be like, we're just going to adopt one because that's just what
mhm,
we should do. No, just do whatever feels right. My parents, when they adopted me, they didn't even sign up for an adoption agency. Our neighbors, my biological grandparents, actually asked them if they wanted a baby because they weren't expecting me. So I have a crazy adoption story, but we can't get into all of that right
huh,
now. But you could write a book on it, honestly.
wow, huh, that's fascinating. We're nearing the end of our hour for our dialogue, and I enjoy that we've gotten a bit afield of the importance of psychodynamic therapy. I feel we addressed it well.
Hmm.
For some reason, I feel called to ask one last question, which
Yes,
is, what do you feel about your name? Do you like your name?
that's a good question. I actually get that a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I used to not like my name, but because, Grace, and I grew up in a very religious household, and I still am religious, but I feel like it's fitting because whenever I want to be rude to someone, which I am sometimes, I can be rude, hands down. But I think your name is Grace. Okay. First off, being called Grace, I know I don't deserve to be here. Like so I first have to give myself grace and think you do deserve to be here. You do deserve for people to care about you, whether you agree with that or not. Give yourself grace. And then it goes to giving others grace. And I'm not perfect at it. You can ask a lot of people, and
Mhm.
I'm not perfect, but it helps me. And I probably the most I ever felt connected to my name, which it's kind of weird, but I attended AA for the first time when I was 16 years old. I went, and I started forming connections with a lot of people that had done a lot of really, really bad things. And I mean like hard prison time, and they've done some awful things. And I started to realize that everyone needs grace. Everyone has a story. And maybe I couldn't save them from themselves, but maybe I could show them a little bit of compassion in a way that other people don't show them because of what they look like, tatted up, or because they're in a gang, or because they were in prison, or whatever. And maybe I could be kind to them, and that would show something in them. And I started doing that. I started being nice to people at the AA meetings,
Mhm.
and I made some really meaningful connections with people. And it was, yeah, and I'm not saying that I had anything to do with their amazing recoveries, but I'm saying that my name helped me feel like I needed to show some grace to people who don't normally get shown grace. So
It's
it
very,
was a really interesting time.
hmm.
And I actually, my senior project, I did a photo series on ex-heroin addicts. And I put that up at my Christian school. They were not. And I interviewed all of them.
Mhm.
And I said, tell me your story. Tell me the hard things in your life. And I put their stories about why they became the people that they did and the things that they did. And it was to show that everyone has a story and everyone needs grace. And it really opened a lot of people's eyes, because I was like the scholarship kid at this really fancy high school in Orange County, and there's a lot of people that, you know, were a little bit stuck up and snooty and didn't want it like black and white, you're either good or bad.
Mhm.
And it helped a lot of people open their eyes and think, okay, wait a minute, these people aren't just drug addicts because they wanted to be drug addicts one day. There's a pattern. So anyway, I like my name now.
Hmm.
I used to not like it as a kid because I was like, it's boring.
Mhm.
But now I like it.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense to me. It's a name that it carries something with it. It bears some responsibility with
Mm-hmm.
in this interesting way that you've just expressed. And it sounds like that's a good orienting force for you, or it has been in a way,
Yeah.
that you have to stop and think, oh, that is something that is expected of me. So we're going to have to wrap up. And
Mm-hmm.
even though we traveled away from the subject for a bit, that's very natural and stuff. But I do feel like we continued to stay within the bounds of a discussion related to talk therapy,
Yeah.
because as I have gotten to know you a bit better over this last hour, I have felt appropriately to the way that the conversation ended that I really hope that you continue to show yourself grace in the future, because it's a difficult world. You're doing, I think, so well relative to the hand that you were dealt. It's amazing. And
Thank you.
yeah, but maybe in some small way, this conversation, will help you to think about the value of a certain type of therapy, so that you can really address like some of
Yeah.
that deep stuff that you even talked
And
about earlier.
start doing more research, I think,
Yeah,
on different forms and figuring it out when I can pay for it.
right. Yeah, there's that part. And there's a lot I'll think about coming off this conversation as well. It's really helpful for me to, hear your story, and
Thank you.
yeah, know what another soul is about and struggling with and thinking about right now. So thank you so much
Oh,
for.
thank you. This was
um,
really fun and really, really enlightening for me. Really appreciate it.
Good, me too.